Welcome to Save One Podcast, where we document real life stories of hope and encouragement with a raw, authentic, and unfiltered approach. Join us as we aim to be the beacon of light in the storm of life that gives hope and direction to those who are struggling to find their way in the storm. Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate y'all checking us out today. I'm really excited because I actually have Therese Apel, who a lot of you know. She is in this studio a lot, but what you may not know, she's also one of my best friends, like a big sister to me. And so we know each other extremely well. And today we are going to tackle a topic that is, I would say, probably the most important thing to the two of us. What we're going to be talking about today is the failure in law enforcement around mental health and how it is so mishandled, overlooked. And so we're gonna be very raw. We're gonna be very open today about some stories, some examples, and we're gonna talk also about what we're doing with LEAPS, which we'll tell y'all more about, Law Enforcement Alliance for Peer Support, as well as what we're working on together for the fire service across the state of Mississippi, to support them in mental health as well. So, Therese, thank you for being here.
Of course. So, I mean, I'm here a lot, but this is fun because I think we're going to be talking about things that we talk about a lot.
Yeah.
So this should be a pretty easy conversation.
Yeah.
Hard, but easy.
Yeah, exactly. This is, I mean, when I say this is mine and your passion,
Yeah.
I will say you are the one person that, I don't know, for a long time now, we talk every day. Mm-hmm. And a lot of dinners, a lot of lunches, as well as our group meetings with some of the other members of these organizations that we work with. This is something we live and breathe and talk about, and plan for, and are actively trying to make a difference in. And so, to me, what I was so excited about today is this is just going to be another conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll probably repeat things that we've talked about 100 times, but
Absolutely.
I think the thing is, like, you and I can have this conversation and we're kind of in our tunnel. It's like we know that this is how we both think. So when we're talking about it, it all makes sense and we can solve the problems of the world. Yeah. But I like being able to have this conversation kind of out where, you know, yeah, there may be some stuff that gets said that people are like, ouch, man. But there's some things that also maybe people have never thought about. And you and I know it because we've both, I mean, I've been in therapy now for 7 years for complex PTSD. And so, you know, working around all first responders and being a first responder, I feel like I do have a unique perspective because also in my job, I work with most of the police departments and sheriff's departments in the state. So I see a lot of things from a lot of different angles. And I feel like, you know, there's a lot of different ways that people are handling it and some are not handling it at all.
Yeah. I was about to say, we're going to kick it off here in just a second and really dive in, but I am going to preface something real quick. If you know me, if you listen to me, if you know my history, I don't really mince words. Mm-hmm. And this is something I'm passionate about. We're going to hit some stuff today that I already know I'm going to get a little fired up about. I will say to those of you in the law enforcement community or the fire service or the military that are listening to this, if I say something you don't like today, pay attention to it because it's something you need to work on.
Well, and I think it's important to say, too, that what we're going to talk about today, usually as a reporter, obviously, I'm just going to be asking objective questions. Yeah. And then I'll issue some thoughts as someone who has dealt with mental health issues, but I won't be making any judgments necessarily. But I have a kind of a saying that I love, and I just sent it to you in a meme. And I'll go ahead and read it just because I think it's fair. I think if you deal in truth, which we do and which law enforcement generally is supposed to, it's a quote from a writer named Anne Lamott. And she says, "You own everything that happened to you. Tell your stories. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better." And I feel like the thing is, in journalism, we have a thing called on the record. Okay. And life is on the record. Conversations can be off the record, but life is on the record. Yeah. So as we discuss those things, I mean, obviously there are going to be people who have feelings about it one way or the other.
Yeah. Well, and like with what I said, I also want to say, now I'm not I'm not out to hurt anybody's feelings, but I know the one thing I've learned from the most is when people tell me stuff that hurts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, if I'm doing something wrong, the injustice it is to other people to not tell them when they're wrong and to not help them see that to me, you caring about somebody is telling them the thing they don't want to hear.
Well, and I've often said in relationships, like when someone lied to me, it's not the thing that you did that you're lying about that bothers me. It's the lie, because was I not worth the truth? Whether it's a relationship, a friendship, a business situation, what is it that makes you think that I'm not worth your telling me the truth?
Yeah.
Because I can't make an informed decision for the whole rest of my life if you don't tell me the truth of a situation that we're in.
That's
So
true.
to me, it's not just about caring about somebody, it's about a respect. You know, you may tell me something you know is going to piss me off. It's going to hurt. It's going to make me change the way I think about myself or you or somebody else. But if you don't give me that truth, I can't live in truth.
Yeah. Well, and before we play this clip, I'll just say, you know, with me and you and our friendship and how close you and I are, we call each other on our crap.
We sure do. Yeah.
Like, there's some people who could not, I'll just be honest, there's a lot of people who don't have skin thick enough to sit at a table with you and I
Right.
because we call each other on stuff every day. But there's just about nobody I trust more than you. And especially if I'm trying to figure something out. And that's just a great example of putting people around you who will challenge you, who will speak truth with you, and then also who will look at you dead in the eye and go, dude, you're being a complete bleep.
Right.
With how you're thinking right now.
Right.
Those are the people that care about you. And so with that, what I want to do, I have a clip that our producer Daniel Anderson has ready for us over here that I'm going to play. It's going to come up on the screen. We're going to watch it real quick, and then we're going to dive into talking about it.
What's the first thing we do as police officers when one of our own is wounded in a gunfight and sent to the hospital? What do we all do? We rush to the hospital, don't we? And what do we do when we get there? We drop to our knees, and what do? We pray. We stand in a circle. We hold hands, and we what? And we pray. And we wait at the hospital for hours and hours and days. And then when we receive good news that they're coming home and they're going to make it, what does the rest of the police department do the day they're released? Do y'all know what they do? They come to the hospital and we line up like we do at funerals. But instead, we have our canines, we have all of our police officers there clapping and cheering, and we welcome them home as a new hero. We welcome them home like they just got elevated in the law enforcement game because they survived a gunfight. They are more validated now. Tell me I'm wrong. What do we do with one of our own when we find out they check into a mental health facility for 30 days? What do we do to them? Do we show up by their bedside? Do we bring them food? Do we stand there and say, man, please make him better. Please make him stronger? Do we pray for them when they come out after a 30-day inpatient? Do we stand in lines and welcome them? No. They come home alone. They walk out of that hospital with nobody except maybe their spouse. And I want you to sit here and think about who you think on that job out of those two police officers that is the healthier of the two. The one that goes back to duty after the gunfight who almost died and he never got help for this thing, or the guy that checked himself into a facility and got help for this thing? Who do you think is more of a liability? What's the first thing we do as police officers?
All right. So real quick, got to give credit where credit is due. The individual that we just watched in that clip, his name is Travis Howes. He was a military member. He was a firefighter. He has been a police officer. I forget the year, unfortunately, but he was involved in a horrific furniture store fire. And on that day, hundreds of firefighters on scene. When the building collapsed, 9 of his brothers were in there. All guys that he worked with every day. And he was on the team that had to go in and recover those men, which all were more than dead at that point. And that, along with his military career, his police career, he struggles with a lot of PTSD stuff. He destroyed himself for a time. He destroyed his family for a time. And eventually he got help and he healed. And what's so amazing now, he's written a book years ago that now he travels around the country and he has these conferences. And so, by all means, there are a few very key guys in the social media world that I follow. And so, if you are law enforcement, military, fire, I promise you that man right there is somebody you need to be following. He has some of the best speeches, advice, everything. And what's awesome, he was also a comedian for like 8-9 years. He traveled around as a comedian. So he's very in your face, which I love. But he's also a comedian. So anyways, just a big shout out to him. I've never spoken to him. I've never met him. Definitely on my bucket list. I respect him a ton. But that is who that is. So with that, I saw that the other night. It actually got shared in our Leaps group.
Sure.
And so I saw it and immediately sent it to you.
Yeah.
And actually, today was not scheduled for us to be on this podcast, but when I watched that clip, I sat there and I probably watched it about 12 times. And then I sent it to you. And of course, the next thing was, we got to talk about this on podcast.
Yep.
And because he sums up in a couple of minute clip everything we talk about.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear, what was your reaction when you saw it?
Well, so my reaction was that, to me, it's so important that someone, and this sounds crazy, but someone like him says it. Because unfortunately, and especially in Mississippi, we have this whole tough guy mentality. And it's not just the guys. I mean, it's the girls too, females in law enforcement, fire, EMS, all that. We've got to be tougher even than the guys. So there's a part of the culture that we live in that says you're not okay, but you can't say that. Yeah. And so for someone to step forward like him, the people that are actually out there talking about mental health right now, that are going to say these bold things like, yeah, you can get shot and you're a hero, but what about if you have these mental health issues and you go get help? Well, you're alone. And what he said, but I want to take that a step further. If you have the courage to go get help, in spite of what, especially in our state, in a lot of places, people are going to say about you, how they're going to put you in a box, how when your friends are talking about you, they're going to say, oh, look out for him. He's got a little something going on up here. I think it matters that someone like Travis House talks about it. I think it matters the other guys that talk about it. And it matters the agencies that I see around the state that have things in place for this, because it is something that it's so taboo to talk about, even in a world that right now, if you're a veteran, there's all kinds of programs for you. You've been to war. Even if you haven't been to war, you trained with guns. So guess what? Like, we're worried about your mental health too. Well, law enforcement is out there. And I wanted to tell this story. I was thinking about this driving in. So in 2001, right before 9/11, there was a reality show called Combat Missions. And what it was they took the elite of every military group. So you had the Rangers, you had the Green Berets, you had the Navy SEALs, Marine Force Recon, all that. But they also had SWAT officers from LA and New York. And so they all ran these operations, these missions, and there was urban warfare and there was all kinds of different things. But what ended up happening was the top three, the last three standing, were Marine Force Recon, LA SWAT, and New York SWAT. And I think it was New York SWAT that won. Wow. And the whole deal was these cops are doing this every day. And Jordan Jones, who's been on your podcast, he and I have talked about how you go to war, you go away, and then you come back home and you're safe. Officers, you guys are on the street every day in, quite often, war-type situations. Yeah. And so for us to be talking about how veterans need help, well, you guys do too. Why aren't we addressing that in a much stronger, louder way?
Yep. I love that you bring that up. I talk about it on here a lot. I'm a huge Sean Ryan podcast supporter. I credit that podcast with really kicking off my mindset of, hey, man, I can get help. And it was because of Guys like Blake Cook, Eddie Penny, Sean Ryan himself, who gets help. Travis Haley's been on there. DJ Shipley, Cole Frackler, Navy SEAL, Deltas, all these guys that we look at, rightfully so, as some of the most badass people in the world, but they're getting help. And, me and Jordan talked about that on the podcast, and exactly what you said. I've heard some other guys like that. I've also talked to some personal friends of mine who are military, that, they went over and served, especially during the GWAT and all that, but they say the same thing. They're like, man, I would never be a cop. They're like, that's horrible. They're like, yes, I went and served in Iraq, Afghanistan, all these places, but I got to go over there for 6-month, 8-month, 12-month rotation, do business with no cameras around.
Yeah.
Nobody judging me. No WLBT. And I will talk about you because I don't like you. No WLBT. No all these people judging you with only one view of the world.
Right.
And then they get to come home and they're the hero.
You want me to tag WLBT?
I don't care. They know what I think. And then he said, but when cops, we go out, and what a few of them have struggled to realize is, and I've had buddies of mine this has happened to, you go out to dinner, you see the guy that you dealt with months ago.
Yeah, that you arrested.
You go in Walmart, where last week you worked a shooting in there.
Yeah.
You went to your neighbor's house a few houses down and had to do CPR on them. You watched them die. Now you got to drive by their house every day, or the wrecks. It's just, and a lot of people don't think about that. I didn't think about it for years.
Oh, you don't think about it if you're not in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me as a reporter, it's the same thing. There are places I drive through and I'm like, homicide, homicide, homicide. Oh, yeah, that one, there was a bad wreck there. And I know if I'm doing that, then you guys are definitely doing that.
Yeah. Well, and what I hate, and it's not, and I don't say all that for like pity party or nothing, because I don't need that. There's a lot of guys out there, and this is what I've learned so much, is I didn't think I had a problem for my whole adult life with anything, but I did. Because what I did not understand until the last year of studying a lot of stuff is what the mind does subconsciously, and the things that are happening in your mind that are forming all of your reactions. And so it's stuff like that guys don't realize it is taking a toll on them. But so that's one thing that I'm glad you brought that up, because it's such an impact on people.
Well, and I think too that I kind of look at things this way. If you haven't been impacted enough to understand the impact, then you haven't been through enough, and to get to what we're talking about, to be a leader. At this point, there are, and I'll use police chiefs or fire chiefs or sheriffs as an example. There are some that I know have been in the fight, and they understand it, and they know what it means to be at the bottom of your mental health. And then there are some that it's almost like they're afraid of it. And I'll go ahead and tell this story because I tell it all the time. When I was a young firefighter, I decided I was going to go to medical first responder school, to the classes, and then I was going to be an EMT, and then I was going to be a paramedic. And I remember I told my chief and my captain that, and we were sitting in the back of a pickup truck after one of our meetings that night, and they said, okay, you can do that, but you have to make us a promise. And I said, what's that? And they said, when you find yourself in the corner with your 357 in your mouth, call us first.
Man.
And I was like, what? That's crazy. And I remember I just said, I don't have a 357. Like, in my mind, it was like, what are y'all even talking about? Like, I am so strong and I am so tough and I am fine and I will be fine. Well, the tricky part is that was around 2007. And it was about 2007 in my career as a reporter that I had started to research trauma in reporters. And I didn't know why I was doing that. I just knew something. I needed to know more about what I was feeling. Now, fast forward several years, as a first responder, I've held kids as they died. I've, pulled, I've never pulled a person out of a fire, but I pulled a puppy out of a fire one time, like stuff like that. But you think about
That's
the things.
almost worse than pulling some people out.
Sometimes.
I'm a big animal guy. Animals are great. People
Yeah.
are not. So
Right.
I get it. That's trauma.
Yeah. So, but by the end of it, it's like, I've almost been killed by a speeding car while I was doing a stand up for a TV station. I mean, different things that cause you all this trauma, and the people that you see die and the people that you see that don't die. And sometimes that's worse.
Yeah.
And so to go back to that moment when they said that, I had nights for the longest time that I always, in my mind, I called it when the shadow comes. And you're sitting there by yourself and you're drinking and you're thinking, I wish just one person that I care about would call me. Because you always have the people that want to associate with you for whatever reason. Because you're a reporter and people recognize you. Because you're, a dude who is a cop or a firefighter. You need somebody that's not that person to call you. And you're sitting there and nobody is going to, because they don't know something's going on with you.
Yeah.
Those are the nights I remembered what my chief and my captain said. And at some point, it was because of those words they said to me that I ended up getting help. But it's because they had been in the crap. They had seen that moment. And if you've got a leader that doesn't understand what that means and what that impact is and how to help you climb out of that, then it's my opinion they haven't seen enough.
Yeah. Well, man, you said so many things that just brought a lot of thoughts to me. One, like you said, you started researching journalism, the trauma in journalists. What I thought about when you said that is, whether you're fire, police, military, journalist, CEO, cart boy at Walmart, I don't care. There's trauma around everybody in the world.
Right.
The problem is, when I was going through therapy, I remember one day I looked at my therapist and I was like, man, I got to ask you something. I was like, how do you sit here and talk to, 5, 6 people a day about all their horrible stuff? How do you absorb all that? And he was like, dude, I go to therapy once a
Got
week.
a therapist.
And I was like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
And that actually really helped me in therapy, to realize, like, oh, my therapist has a therapist because he's taking so much stuff. And so in the same way, I was talking to a firefighter last night because I was telling him about what we're doing with, for the moment, what we're calling maps. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we got to talking about how when you're going through life, stuff from the job, but also just stuff from life. For the firefighters out there, you are going to know the term Blevy. So think about pressure washers, think about propane tanks, think about anything and everything that has a pop-off valve. And if you understand that, you understand what your body and your mind does. We take in stuff throughout our whole life. Well, I love Travis Haley has a great term called off-gassing. Jordan and I talked about this. If you're taking stuff in, and we all are every day of our life, some at different magnitudes, obviously, but as you take stuff in, it's got to go back out, or at some point, you are going to blow up.
Yeah.
That pop-off valve's going to throw, and it's all coming out at one time. For me, that was when I was 35 years old, because of a single instance that happened, which was my divorce. It triggered everything that I had ever tried to just bottle up and push away. And it all came out at one time. And so that's what I try to warn guys against. And I talk a lot, just like you do, around fire, police, military. Those are the ones I care about so much. And I understand, because I was fireman, I was cop, and I got a lot of military friends. But it's not just that. Don't get me wrong. It's seriously, like, and this isn't a shot at like you're a lesser person. It literally, it's the waitress. It's the cart boy at Walmart. It's the car salesman. It's whatever you're doing. Life is happening around you. And if you're taking it all in, but you're not getting it back out in a healthy manner, it is going to erode and it is going to blow up at some point.
Right. And now I will add, though, we do know that the normal person, just an average human on the street, will, I think they say it's 3 to 4 critical incidents in their life. 2 to 4. So a police officer is, I mean, what is it?
400 plus in that career.
It's in the hundreds. So that said, I mean, you take the trauma a normal person goes through, multiply it by hundreds
Yeah.
for a first responder.
Yeah.
The other thing, I mean, yes, you had your major come apart. However, had you not done that, it would have been a heart attack at 65. I mean,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
the thing. You look at firefighters, cops, EMS, I never want to leave them out because I think they see more than anybody else put together. And firefighters are in that as well. But I think it is important that we understand too that your mental health, the reason health is in that is for a reason. You go to the doctor if you break your leg. You go to the doctor if you get shot. You go to the doctor if you've got COVID. You go to the doctor if you've got anything. You think you got cancer? Let me tell you what's worse. Like cancer, if you say that you don't have cancer when you do, well, it's going to kill you. And your
Yeah.
mental health is the same. You can deny it all day long, but that doesn't keep it from being a major factor in your ability to live a normal life.
100%. So I want to talk about exactly what Travis said
let's
in
do.
this video. And so we have some real world stories that can show this. And before I say anything on it, I want any of my guys, girls that are in law enforcement, man, if you've been injured, if you've been shot, if you've been in the car wreck and we showed up and we lined the street, and I've done it when they get released, and we celebrated and we made the GoFundMes and we raised tons of money and all that stuff.
We're not taking away from you.
Absolutely not. What we're about to talk about and say is the failure is that we're not doing it over here.
Yeah.
And something that I didn't understand for so long is that, you know, I had my first back surgery when I was 20. I was 6 months into my fire career, had back surgery. They said I wouldn't be a fireman, came back out, CPAP, went through it. I think there were like, you know, on my department, 20-something guys showed up to watch me do CPAP. Nobody shows up to watch you do CPAP.
Right.
A few of them there were to see if I would fail. A bunch of them were there to encourage me and cheer me on coming back from back surgery. You know, I had another back surgery when I was 35. I've had other injuries. Buddies of mine have had horrible injuries. I mean, I got buddies in law enforcement that they've been shot. They've been ran over by cars. They've been beat up, all kind of stuff. Man, absolutely. I prayed for them. I took them stuff. I celebrated, and I will do it every day till the day I die. However, our brain is no different.
Right.
Breaking my leg is no different than me having an injury to my brain, an emotional crisis. It is an injury. It's the most important organ in our body.
Well, and for the people who say, well, you wuss, I mean, why can't you just suck it up? There's actually scientific evidence that your brain does get injured. Like that it's not just if something blows up and gives you TBI. Like when you have PTSD, there is injury to your brain from something that happened to you just the same way there's injury to your shoulder if you get shot in it.
Yep, 100%. And, you know, everybody cheers you on when you're doing rehab after a back surgery. Everybody cheers you on after you break your leg in a car wreck. Everybody cheers you on after you're doing rehab in for a gunshot, whatever it is. But they don't cheer you on when you're going through a mental health situation.
No.
And so that's what we're going to talk about. That's what, man, when I watched that, and it hit me in so many ways because I've had friends that were in the hospital. Unfortunately, you know, years ago or a few years ago, when we lost the 2 officers in Brandon, I was one of the vehicles. I escorted the ambulance to the hospital. And I remember that day, man, you could not get on the UMC campus.
Right.
There were hundreds of us.
Yeah.
And we all stood. I had never shook one of those guys' hand. I know who they were because we all know who each other is.
Yeah.
But I didn't know them. But dude, my heart was breaking for them. And when I watched that video, that was one example I thought was like, man, so many of us were there, rightfully so. I always want to see that. But then I thought about guys that I know have checked into a mental facility or they've stepped away from the career because they were struggling with some stuff. And I sat there and I thought to myself, you know, back then, because I handle stuff differently now and that, but back then, I didn't do nothing for them.
Yeah.
I didn't show up. I didn't take them food. I didn't even freaking call them. Because back then, I didn't recognize until going through it that one, how lonely that can be, how much you need encouragement during that really bad. And the shame and the guilt, and there's all these feelings and emotions that I wasn't aware of. And again, for a long time, I was the guy that would tell you to quit being a pansy,
Right.
suck it up, and let's go. And unfortunately, I did that to people I worked with and to family members.
Well, and I got to play reporter here. So you told me, and we're going to just put it out there, but when you were a young firefighter, like suicide scenes, like that's their fault. You know,
yeah.
like, yeah, you just kind of were callous to it.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that we all go through when you start seeing stuff for the first time. It'll kind of hit you. But you don't ask nobody about it. You don't navigate it. You don't even know how. I mean, so for instance, one of the things I've learned, like when we're talking about the brain and all that, for men, your frontal cortex isn't developed until you're 25.
Right.
I started when I was 20. I mean, I saw my first dead body when I was 20. I did CPR on it. This 23-year-old guy died, and I was 20 at the time. First suicide was probably somewhere around 20, 21, all that. And over the years, when I was a firefighter, I've cut teenagers out of trees. I've seen people's heads blown off. I've seen the pill suicides, the knife suicides, all those. And yeah, like I hate even talking about it because I'm so ashamed of it.
Right.
Yeah, my go-to was, man, put the coward in the body bag and let's roll.
Right.
We gotta go eat supper, or we're running late for the gym. We need to go do this workout. Let's wrap this up. And I hate that. I hate that so bad.
But I need to say for everyone else that, I mean, I think as a first responder, everyone kind of goes through something where they're trying to find how to handle that.
Yeah.
Like you're seeing your first dead bodies, you're working your first wreck with a kid, you know, like different things like that. And your brain is trying to process this thing that most of the world will never have to see. And that's, my therapist always says, you know, trauma is your brain responding in a normal way to an abnormal circumstance.
Yes.
And I love when he says that, because the fact is, like, the fact that you are like, what? And then you throw up a tough barrier. Like, oh, well, clearly I'm not going to let that affect me because I would never do that because that's wimpy or whatever.
Yep.
That is a defense that we are innately built to do, because our jobs in that moment is, I'm tough, I'm strong, I'll run into that fire and get you out. I'll return fire if some guy is trying to kill you. Like, my job is to be the protector. This guy failed his whole family, so what a wuss, whatever. But your brain is screaming because it's like, how could you? What is so sad that this guy felt like that's his only option?
Yeah.
But you don't know how to do that until you have been there yourself and you realize the steps that it took to get you there were not, in most cases, your own fault.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things I know we wanted to really tackle today, and I mean, everything that I'm about to say is straight up my opinion. I know, same thing with you, it's your opinion. But there's right and wrong ways to handle situations. And I'm going to kind of kick off talking about this, admitting a fault of mine that some of the guys you may be able to figure out and know who I'm talking about, or that individual may be listening. And if so, I apologize to you for this. So when I was at Pearl Fire as a young lieutenant, I was like mid-20s. First off, let me say this, you know, we all make mistakes. The reason I'm able to give grace both to myself and to so many other people now is I greatly look at and understand lack of ignorance and lack of education will make you do a lot of stupid stuff. And so, you know, that's one way I say it. The other way I say it is, and I remind myself of this every day, I did the best that I could at that time with the training, the skills, and the knowledge that I had at that time.
Right.
And so, you know, 10 years, hopefully I'm smarter than I am today and I know more. But anyways, so early on in my role as a lieutenant, we had a firefighter one time, witnessed a really bad scene, and he got off truck, turned his gear, and left. Yeah. He said, I'm done. I can't do it. And man, some of the guys there, they did right. dude, they loved him. They supported him. They understood. They were older.
Yeah.
They were wiser.
They were the ones that have been there.
Yeah, they were smarter. My reaction was good. He's a wuss. We don't need him. Get him out of here. He can't cut it. He can't hack it. I'd rather him leave now than lock up or anything like that. And there was a point later down the road where he came back. He had to re-interview, retry out, do all that. And by that point, I was actually on the interview board, and I reamed that dude. I mean, I told him I didn't want him there. I told him he didn't deserve to be there. Told the other guys on the board didn't deserve to be there. You know, I looked at him as weak, and thank God, a lot of older guys than me that had a lot more wisdom and maturity and empathy and compassion and everything, they saw all the potential in the guy.
Yeah.
And they understood that, hey, man, he stepped away. He went and did the work, and he came back. He's stronger now.
Mm-hmm.
I was too ignorant and uneducated to recognize that. I would have ended his career.
Yeah.
Luckily, he came back, and he is thriving in that career. And he's a great dude, and he is a hell of a firefighter. But that's just an example. I always say, because in a minute I will talk about some stuff that has happened to me where I was on the receiving end of that if we want to, but I do try and admit and use myself as an example as much as I can. And that is an area where I failed back then that now I would never have that reaction.
Right.
Ever. But it took me going through it to develop that level of maturity and understanding and empathy. And so I know one of the things we wanted to do was, tackle some examples of what to do, what not to do.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to start that by taking ownership of that is absolutely what you do not do.
Right. Well, and you and I have had conversations where you've kind of given grace in a way, and I know that there's a lot of hurt surrounding some of the things that have happened to you, but you've given a little bit of grace at times to the people that have done the same thing to you because you've been in that spot.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the thing, like in the same way you can't always help what hurts you, you also can't always help the things that you don't know. And that's why it's so important when I say over and over again, as a leader, if you haven't been there, you're probably not ready to be a leader yet. And doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means a little more experience might make you a better leader.
Oh, 100%. And I will say this, that some might not like to hear, some might disagree with. There are a lot of chiefs, assistant chiefs, training officers, administrative commands, especially within the law enforcement side. They got no business sitting in those seats.
Right.
They are hellacious cops.
Mm-hmm.
They are amazing interdiction guys. They are amazing canine handlers. They are amazing door kickers.
Mm-hmm.
But they lack so much understanding and education that they never deserve. Right now, they do not need to be in those seats. Because, and we're going to talk about this a lot, I know, when you're in that leadership role, when you're in that administration role, something that I would have never, you wouldn't have heard me say years ago, now I understand it is, your greatest responsibility is creating better men and women.
Right.
The academy and the streets teach them how to be a cop. Your job is the same as like a father. You're supposed to look out for these people. You're supposed to protect them, care about them, make sure they have the resources they need. That is, if you'll do all that stuff right, you'll never be navigating the breakdown. And that's what, I know you've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
I could sit here and name off the chiefs that fall into that category, and then I could name some chiefs, and I know you could because we've talked about them, who they are excellent in it.
Yeah.
Their priority when they walk into the office every day is, how are my guys?
Yeah.
And if one of them needs help, does not matter what it is, the world stops until they get that help.
Right.
And so what I wish, you can say, I've never been a chief. That's awesome. I haven't. But I can tell you from being under certain chiefs that if you care, and it's also, we're talking police, but this is business too.
Yeah.
Um,
This is business leaders as well. Absolutely.
listen to ones like Dave Ramsey, who I listened to the other day, talking about how he runs his company and how important it's all about his people.
Mm-hmm.
If he takes care of his people, they will do their job,
That builds
and they
loyalty.
will do it good.
Right.
If you have all healthy people, well, then they're going to be the most productive, and they're going to turn around and handle the citizens in the best way possible. So I say that I really, if you're in a leadership role, man, if you're not trying to understand if you're not reading and learning about leadership, if you're not reading and learning about mental health, if you're not talking to your people and knowing what's going on in their personal life to a degree,
Yeah.
dude, you're failing. I'm just going to say, I think you're failing
Yeah.
if you're not actively doing those things as a leader.
Well, and I think it's worth saying too that, like, okay, so we're saying a sheriff or a chief needs to be able to know all about their 165 guys in their department or whatever. No, that's why you have captains and sergeants and lieutenants and all that kind of stuff. So just throughout, like, even if you have a buddy system in your department, like
Yes.
and I've told you, Jeremy, I talked to a guy that used to be with a department on the coast, and they had, suicide watch. Basically, they just kind of watched their officers' mental health. I think they called it something else, but they made sure that somebody had eyes on everybody, especially if they were going through something. They made sure they knew who the friends were. It wasn't like a Big Brother situation, but it was like a, hey, just is everyone okay? The other thing they had though was a career suicide watch, and basically they had a calendar that had important dates. If you've been divorced, if your parents have died, if you lost a child, whatever like that. So they knew when those times were coming up, and they could watch you to make sure you're good. They could check in with you, take you to lunch. I've always said that, like, saying to somebody, "Are you okay?" is never as helpful as, "Hey, you want to go, grab lunch? Let's just," because I'm not going to open up for at least 30 minutes of talking. So, but to have these situations in the department, another friend of mine was telling me about a thing called a resiliency officer, whose job was kind of to know these things, to put programs in place, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I believe that leadership that cares has those kind of things. It's not just sending a couple officers to leaps every now and then. It's about, putting things in place that say, look, we care not just about what you do here, but we care about if you got a sick kid, if your kid's got cancer, we want to be there for your family. We want to uphold you. You're going through a divorce. We've got other guys that have had that too. There will be nobody cornering you to say, you need to get over it. There won't be that situation. It'll be, hey, we got your back, man. This is the worst thing you can go through outside of like what we do in our job, and sometimes even including that.
I love that. If you're in a leadership role, you need to rewind this podcast, listen to what she just said, and then find out what department that is and mimic it, because that's amazing. And you made a good point. People, and there's probably a lot of chiefs out there and stuff like that, administrations that would say, well, I have 100 and something officers. I can't keep up with all. That's right, you can't. But you have a command staff of 7.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't keep up with 7, you definitely shouldn't be a chief.
And if your 7 are guys who don't care enough or say we don't need that, get another 7.
Yeah, and it's leading by example.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have those conversations with your next level down. And then after you have that conversation, it's, hey, do me a favor. I'm pouring into you. Make sure you're checking on your guys. Yeah. And, that's the thing. That way, your command staff, your lieutenant, your sergeants, your captains, as it goes up, depending on what agency and all that, it's reporting up.
Mm-hmm.
Chief don't have to know about every single thing going on with that person. But when he says, hey, man, your rookie's stats are down this month. What's going on? I don't know. He's a piece of shit.
Yeah. But really,
no, man, he lost his mom the other day.
Right.
He's grieving the loss of his mom.
And you gave him 3 days off because that's what the city allows. But do you know how long that takes? Not 3 days.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I love in Leaps, Tim Rutledge, he talks about a lot of times, you start writing a guy up because he's late
Mm-hmm.
a few times. Well, you don't know his kid's been diagnosed with something that causes him to, in the mornings, get sick every morning.
Mm-hmm.
And on the, Tim Rutledge uses this on the way to, I think it happened in one, every time, every other day, every few days, whatever, once a week, the kid will, defecate on himself going to school. And so he's got to take him back home, get his change clothes, all that. Well, if you don't know that, you're sitting here writing this guy up,
Mm-hmm.
stacking his folder on him, and like happens in the PD, you're telling everybody around, oh yeah, he's a piece of crap.
Right.
He's not going to be a good officer. No, man, he's struggling. And so that's what is so important. That's what I love about Leaps, and we'll talk
Yeah.
about that in a second, is it's just recognizing that, man, people have stuff going on. And, me and Jordan Jones talked about this a lot, and we mentioned on the podcast, it's real easy to think about the stuff like death, divorce, kids sick, stuff like that. What if the guy's sick
Yeah.
and he don't know it yet?
Mm-hmm.
What if he's got the beginning of cancer? What if he's got low testosterone?
Mm-hmm.
What if he's a number of things?
Well, and I haven't told you about this, but one of my dearest friends that was a firefighter, I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. He came down here to interview for a job at MEMA, and I noticed when I talked to him that his voice was slurred. It was almost like sounded like he was drunk, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And he was telling me, well, everybody was listening really closely in my interview. I think I did good. And I was thinking it's probably because they couldn't understand you. They were trying really hard,
Yeah.
but I couldn't figure out what it was. And like I talked to a relative of his that was like, yeah, I wonder if he's just is he drinking a lot? What's going on? Turned out he had ALS.
Oh,
And
man.
since it has killed him. But I mean, it was like everyone was wondering, like, what's that? Is he drunk? Like, what's going on? And it was hard for him he couldn't find a job because everyone kept wondering what's going on. Is there something? And nobody stopped to say, could this be neurological? It was just really just kind of a, what's that about?
Exactly.
And instead, he was in the early stages of ALS.
Yeah.
And we're so judgmental, and we're so busy that there's not really compassion. And
Yeah.
it really is all right, I can't diagnose whatever's up with you, so I'm going to put you away. I'm
Yep.
going to say you're a piece of shit. I'm going to say you're worthless as a cop. I'm going to say whatever. And I feel like I know that through Leaps, a statistic that I learned was after a critical incident, and that can be a line of duty shooting. I think that's what we usually talk about it as, or a major wreck or something like that. 80% of those officers involved in those things are within a year no longer with that department. And generally, it is because that department has found a reason that they're displeased with that officer. They fire him for something. And so you look at that situation, and generally it's not going to be like if you were to corner those leaders in that department, they'd say, well, no, it wasn't because of the shooting. It's because he's come in late every day since, or because, his productivity went down, or we kept finding him asleep behind the whatever building, or,
Yeah.
things like that. Things that we recognize as mental health problems, or maybe he's acting out. Maybe, in one case, I know a deputy that was fired not long after a line of duty shooting because he acted out at a wedding and it started a fight. And they were like, dude, we can't have you on our staff. Good call. I see why you would
Yeah.
fire somebody for that. But on the other hand, what was going on with him? Well, he had been involved in a very critical incident and didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
And so he was just acting out. And to me, that's where, especially after that critical incident, but that may not just be a line of duty shooting. That could be a divorce. That could be your kid's sick. That could be any of the things that happen to us that cause our brains to act in a normal way in an abnormal situation.
Absolutely. And then at the same time, we talk about all those events that happen, but getting sick's a real thing.
It is.
Depression is real.
Oh, yeah.
Anxiety is real. And you may have gone 40 years of your life and never felt a day of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of nowhere it happens. It don't mean you're any less of a person. It means you need to go to the doctor.
Right.
That's all it is. It's no different than breaking your arm. But we sit there and say, because I've been in the room when we did it, oh man, look at his stats. He's slacking.
Right.
Guess what happens? Big target gets on your back.
Yeah.
Now everybody's out to get you. Or, man, he's been real short-tempered lately. Well, what's going on? Nobody asks that.
Mhm.
They just start writing them off. Or another one I've seen. We've all seen it. Dang, man, he should be in good shape. look how fat and out of shape
Oh,
he
yeah.
is now. He
Yeah.
don't want to work out. He don't want to go to the ring. He don't want to do nothing. He ain't making no stops. All he
Mhm.
does is go freaking hit up the gas station and sit on the side of the road and get fat.
Right.
Has anybody asked why?
Yeah, and that honestly, and I'm speaking from my own life and from several of my friends and family members, one of the first things you see in depression,
Yep.
it's going to be their physical appearance. If they're not gaining or losing weight, they're not taking care of themselves, they're not washing their hair, they're not brushing their teeth, things like that. Like things that we go, oh my gosh, gross. Or like, God, just get in the gym, or like eat a cheeseburger.
Yeah.
Those are all things that start to be the beginning of the descent for, I mean, and not for everybody. Some people go to the gym more, but it's still a thing that you can diagnose. Now, do you want to talk about, I want to talk about the ask, the day that you say, I need help. And I know for me, it went a lot better than for you, because I had been involved in a large situation in Brookhaven where a guy had killed 8 people. And there was a lot of spin-off trauma from that. But I had built this whole life of trauma at that point. I'd been on all these crime scenes. I'd been on all these death scenes as a firefighter, first responder, and as a reporter. And it was Valentine's Day of 2018 when all those kids got shot in Florida. And the body count ended up being 17, but it was at 4 when this happened. I realized I was sitting in my chair at work at the Clarion Ledger, which at the time was the biggest newsroom in the state. And I was just like rocking back and forth, kind of like this. And I was thinking, everybody in my newsroom was fighting over gun control at that point. We don't even know the body count. We're all yelling about gun control.
Mhm.
And I just kept thinking, do you guys know what it looks like when somebody's been shot in the head? Do you know what it looks like when someone's been shot with an automatic rifle? Like, do you understand what's going on in that school right now? And these thoughts are just cycling in my mind, and I'm just rocking back and forth. And at that point, I thought, God, I need help. And I didn't know it. I mean, I knew that like I'd started to kind of dabble in leaps and things like that, but I didn't know how critical it was that I get help at that moment. So I picked up the phone and I called a lady I know that works in it. And the next day, she had me an appointment that ended up getting me into intensive outpatient therapy. And I did that for 10 weeks. And I was in there. There was a spin-off eating disorder along with my PTSD, but they put me in with addicts and with drug addicts, alcoholics, sex addicts, that kind of thing, because the recovery in a lot of cases is the same. And I learned so much about compassion and all that kind of stuff. And my boss was awesome with it and all that kind of stuff. And you know why that was? Because I worked in kind of a liberal industry where the mental health discussion is one that was regular. And when I said I am breaking down, they pulled up all this research on, well, at the time it was wartime reporters. And they could look at what happens to reporters that are at war and how they go through all this stuff. And they said, get help. We're here for you. Do whatever you need to do.
Wow.
That's not what happened with you. Talk me through the day that you asked for help in as much as you want to. You may not be comfortable.
Yeah, no, I will. I mean, I'll practice what I preach about being vulnerable. I haven't talked about this openly on any kind of platform necessarily. So the part of my story that people do know is the day I graduated the police academy, my now ex-wife left me. That was that pop-off valve. And so when that valve blew, everything I had ever suppressed in my life came out at one time. And so I found out, that day I graduated, wife's leaving. That was on a Thursday. I had to report for work Monday. So I go straight into work. I'm working, I'm a rookie cop. There's a lot of expectations as a rookie cop. Get out there, work hard, be grinding, doing stuff like that. And I was a weird rookie. I was 35 years old. I had 8 years of fire service, 2 years police reserves. So it was a little different. There wasn't like as much as a, young 20-year-old cop. But anyways, I was dealing with panic attacks. I was not sleeping. I lost 26 pounds in 2 weeks after she told me she was leaving. I was having really bad night sweats. I'd wake up 4 or 5 times a night, have to change clothes. So I was literally running for months on maybe 2 hours of sleep a night, if that. Um, Not eating, working out twice a day, and panic attacks, anxiety, all kind of stuff. And so, I mean, I had a few on duty. My lieutenant was aware of what I was going through. I mean, he had gone through some stuff too, in the past. And so, like, I mean, I had a few times where I could feel him coming on, and like I'd let him know, like, hey man, I need a few minutes. So I'd go to the range, and like I remember a couple of times I was sitting in my car one night, and I was having such a bad panic attack, anxiety. I didn't feel like I could breathe, sweat and all that. Like I just remember I ripped my vest off, I ripped my shirt off. I'm sitting in my I'm sitting in my patrol car, shirtless, air on blast in the wintertime, just like having to collect. And so at that time, like I hadn't learned the tools in therapy
Right.
of, rescue breathing, collecting my thoughts, understanding my thoughts, stuff like that. I didn't take any medicine at the time. I hadn't taken that step yet. And so I lived like that for 2-3 months. And finally, one night I was off. My shift was working, but I was off, and I was having one of those really tough nights. And it was just like it hit me, and I was like, I don't know what I need. I need some help. And my dad, we had almost lost him. He was going through a lot of heart stuff at the time. He had open heart surgery. He had 4 ablation. I didn't want to call him. He's always my go-to, but I didn't want to call him because, dear God, if my stress and everything ends up killing my daddy, then I'm definitely done.
Yeah.
So I didn't bother him and Mama, and so I called my lieutenant, and I said, "Man, I can't take it no more. Like I don't know what I need, but I need something. Like I cannot keep doing these panic attacks. I cannot keep doing these night sweats. I cannot keep doing this not sleeping stuff. Like I can't do it." I don't ever remember mentioning the keywords
Right.
because a lot of my timeline over the last 2 years is blurry,
Mm-hmm.
but I am quite confident I had not talked about hurting myself.
Right.
I did not say the word suicide. I did not say none of the keywords. And for anybody, fire, police, medical, you know what I mean by the keywords. I didn't say none of them. He said, man, he had been telling me you need to get some anxiety medicine. You need to get some medicine, and it'll make you feel totally different. You'll be good. So I called him. I was like, man, would you go with me? Like, where do I go? Where do I start? Like, I've never been down this road. I don't even know which doctor to call for that. And he's like, well, the best thing would be you could go to the hospital, and that'll get the ball rolling. Just go see a regular doctor at the hospital. They'll give you probably some stuff for like a few days, and then you'll have a follow-up appointment. I was like, all right. So he kind of talked me into it, and he was like, why don't you come up here and meet us? He said, come up here and meet me. Let's talk about it a little bit, and I might can break away and go with you. And I was like, man, that'd be good. I really don't want to go by myself. I already hate hospitals. I hate doctors. I hate dentists. I hate everything medical.
Right.
Nobody wants to go to that, and so especially for that. So I go and meet him, and I get out of my truck, and battalion chief from the fire department pulls up. And I looked at him. I said, please tell me you're not doing what you're doing. And he said, Jeremy, we're going to get you some help. He's like, let's just have a conversation. And I was like, okay. I mean, I know all those guys.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, maybe we are going to have a conversation. Staying there a few more minutes. We're talking. Ambulance pulls up. I looked at him and I said, I cannot. I had a lot of choice words in the moment.
Yeah.
But I said, I cannot believe what y'all are about to do. I said, if we're going to do this, I said, get your taser ready. And he was like, Jeremy, please don't fight all of us. And I was like, I'm not, but I might, depending on who gets off that ambulance. Right. And we'll leave that at that. And ended up not being that situation, but I did get forced into going. So I got shipped to UMC at like 9 o'clock at night. And UMC is where my ex-wife works, so that kind of sucked. I I'll say this because it is funny. I don't care what anybody says or thinks. Um, since they all know who I was, they changed the name on my bracelet,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a Hispanic name.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of a funny thing that
Right.
that I say now. It's so I forget I was something Gonzalez in UMCER
Right.
for the night, and so I met with the doctor. The doctor was like, "Man, you don't want to hurt yourself or nothing." Like, yeah, like a low dose anxiety, that'd be good. Like, here's your follow up appointment, all this stuff. And I was like, "Man, I really appreciate it. You've been super cool, super nice." And he's like, "Look, you know the deal with the hospital. It's gonna probably take hour and a half, 2 hours to get you discharged." And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, that's fine. I was super calm, super nice to everybody. And so they were like, "Hey, we're gonna get you to come sit back here in this room. Nobody will bother you. Keep all your stuff. No big deal." I was like, "All right, great. I appreciate y'all." He had already given me like who I was gonna go see. Kind of talked to me about some different medicines. So I was actually laying back there researching the medicines that he had told me. Like, this would be good, that would be good. Well, they'll have to play with them and kind of see how they affect you, make sure you can still work on them and all that. So I'm back there on my phone. I'm going through all these medicines, trying to read about them, learn about them. And all of a sudden, this nurse walks in. And she was like, "Hey, I need you to take all your clothes off, put them in this bag, put all your belongings in this bag." And I was like, "For what?"
We going to jail?
I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Man, this is what we tell people when they're, in the jail." So I was like, "Well, what are we doing? Where are we going?" Like, and she just looked at me. She said, "Oh, you're one of them tough guys that wants to do it the hard way." And I was like, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I'm really, I'm not following you. I don't know what you're wanting me to do." And she walked out. And next thing you know, she walked in with another nurse and 3 cops. And I was like, "Oh, I know what we're doing." And I looked at her. I was like, "Ma'am," I showed her this. I was like, I've already talked to the doctor. Like, y'all are working on my discharge. He talked to me about these medicines. I'm sitting here researching them. What are we doing? Like, by the way, I know what those syringes are. I was a firefighter and EMT. Like, I know what you got, and this ain't gonna go how you want it to go.
Right.
Everything in me changed to fight mode.
Mm-hmm.
Fight or flight. I was 100% fight.
Understood.
And so I backed into the corner. I told the 3 cops, I was like, "Guys, please don't do this. I am a police officer." Told them agency and all that. I was like, I'm not gonna allow it to happen. I was like, I'm about to fight every one of you. I was like, and trust me, until you get the tasers in me, I'm gonna hurt every one of you.
Yeah.
And I was hollering at that point, like yelling, like, "I need a supervisor." I sounded like the idiots on the police videos, like,
Right.
"Go get your supervisor." But anyways, I was scared to death. So at that point, I didn't know what my plan was. I was gonna fight everybody that got within arm's reach of me.
Well, and I want to add right here that, like, to tell this story, there may be people listening or watching who are like, "Dude, just chill and comply." Like, they may be having that reaction to it. But when you're in that situation and you don't know what's going on and you don't know what's coming next, and you know that you were told, "I'm about to get discharged." You also know you're here because you asked your brothers for help and that went terribly wrong. And now all of a sudden, are they about to commit you? Are they taking you to Whitfield? Like, you don't know the answers here, and nobody's talking to you about it because they're like, "Oh, you want to do this the hard way."
Yeah.
So I just wanted to put that into context for anybody that might just be sitting there going like, "Come on, man, just comply."
Yeah.
Just
Well, and the
just do it.
sucky part too, you say that I didn't know what was going on, but I did know what was going
Yeah,
on.
you had an
I
idea.
was a firefighter EMT. I've put a lot of people on the ambulance that are headed for a 72-hour hold.
Right.
I knew that was Haldol. I knew what was in her hand.
Right.
So I knew if she gets to me, I'm going to be unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Any cop in the world will tell you, us being unconscious, not being like, there's training and stuff like no. If they would have said, "Turn around, put your hands behind your back, you're under arrest," I would have said, "Yes, sir, turn around, put my hands behind my back."
Right.
We would have rode that situation out. But knowing that, no, she's about to stick me, I'm going to go unconscious, and I don't know where I'm going to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, it was, I didn't know if I was just going to fight in the room or if I was about to try to run out of the hospital. I didn't know what was coming next, but I just knew that cannot go in me. That's not what I'm here for.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm hollering and all. Supervisor runs in, and she was like, "I'm so sorry." I still to this day, I don't know what went on. I don't know if she read the orders wrong. I don't know. But that supervisor chewed everybody out, kicked them all out of my room, handed me my stuff back, and was like, "Jeremy, I'm so sorry. We're working on your discharge papers. Just give us a few more minutes." And I just looked at her and I was like, "Get out.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, but get out."
Right.
And I positioned my bed to where they would have to at least come over the bed to get to me. And I made me a little shield to catch the taser prongs. And I sat there and I cried for an hour.
Right.
By myself. I was there for 7.5 hours, 8 hours
Mm-hmm.
by myself.
And
Nobody. And that night, all I was asking for was for somebody that had offered to go with me, to just go with me.
Yeah.
And so, like, when I watched that video that Travis put out, man, it hit home so bad because it was like, dude, yeah, I've been there. He said it. Like, what do you do when somebody asks for help? Nobody's there.
Right.
I was by myself with a fake name of Gonzalez on me, with somebody about to stick Haldol in me,
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out what I was going to do, scared to death. So the worst part of that, I ended up getting released. No big deal.
Yeah.
All that. Went to my follow-up appointment. Spent weeks with the medicines and all that, like trying to figure out what worked, what didn't work. And I would take them off duty, go to the range because I knew all my times and stuff like that, reaction times. So, like, I was real adamant, like, okay, whatever y'all give me, I can't have a decrease in my ability to defend myself, shoot, anything
Mm-hmm.
like that, tactics. Did all that stuff, and it did help. It did help a lot. It cleared my mind enough to be able to start getting some help, but my days were not over. But what that night did to me was I never told anybody again I was struggling.
Yeah.
I never asked for help.
Yeah. And that's where the leadership comes in. You cannot mishandle that situation because it's not just that officer that's never going to confide in you again. It's the rest of your officers who saw what happened to him.
Yeah.
You know, and I dare say that in certain areas of the state, there is a culture of you're okay, you're fine. If you're not, we're going to treat you like you need to go for a 72-hour hold. And I personally know of people who have taken their own lives because they were in an environment that said it's not okay for you to ask for help.
Yeah.
It's not okay for you to not be okay. And, you know, I understand there are people who don't know cops that would say, well, the problem is we've given a gun to this guy who's having a mental breakdown. But in truth, he's not going through anything that a normal person wouldn't go through under the same situation, you know, under the same
100%.
circumstance.
And I do want to say this because obviously there's tons of people around here listening to the podcast who know who I'm probably talking about, who know what agency I was at, who my shift was, all that. Hear me now. I don't hold none of that against them.
Oh, yeah.
At all.
Again, they were working with what they knew at the time.
And so, you know, we talked about this in our first meeting with MAPS, and we talk about it in the LEAPS group too. They did what they were trained to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
They did what they were trained to do. And that's not always the right thing.
Right.
But it's bigger. I don't blame them. I mean, 11 weeks of the police academy, we had a bull crap 2-hour talk on mental health and family.
Right.
Out of 11 weeks. So, and then, you know, other than LEAPS, there's no mental health training. You know, Jordan's got Halos now, and with RCTA, hopefully that's coming around more and going to get in more departments. But so, like, when I'm talking about this stuff, I'm not mad. I'm not mad at those guys.
Right.
At all. Because they did what they know to do.
Right.
My passion, because I don't even want to call it anger, my passion is we have to know better. We have to educate better. And unfortunately, we depend so much, whether it's whatever career you're in, you go to the training, you go to the education that your bosses tell you to go to. Okay, what has to start happening is everyone has to realize how important this is and go read a freaking book.
Mm-hmm.
Watch a video, follow Travis Howes, listen to some podcast about it. You know, take 30 minutes a shift and just read the chapter of a book. Like, sometimes you got to pursue your own education and stuff that matters to be a good leader. And so that's really why I'm telling this story is that is the model. I mean, you're a first responder. Everybody who's listening to this as a first responder knows. For any civilian, you show up and they're having that. The goal is get them to get on the ambulance without a fight, and then it's out of your hands. You've done what you're supposed to do. Now, whatever happens, you can say, "Well, man, that ain't on me. I did what I was supposed to do." The problem is, don't do that to your brothers and your sisters.
Right. This is a place where in that ask, in I need help, in I don't know what to do, I'm coming apart, I have seen several people that I care about very much lose their gun and badge because they were treated like anybody else. And I'm not saying like if you're going to be all like,
I
well, we
lost
shouldn't.
mine.
Yeah, you did too. And the thing is, you can't just assume that because you're in the lowest part of your life that that's okay. Like the people that are willing to end your career over that, again, shouldn't be leaders. And I'm not saying in just your career, I'm talking about in general. Because the fact is, your best officers, your best even people, the best people I know are the ones that have been broken.
Yeah.
The ones that have been to those depths of the hardest parts of their life. Would you rather have an officer that's never understood someone who wants to commit suicide, who shows up and a dude is gonna off himself right here? You know, talk him down. Okay, well, some dude, some little baby officer who's never had this problem is going to be like, dude, it's not my problem. Like, I can get you on the ambulance. We can take you into custody and you can kill yourself and I don't care. I'll go back to work. Or you've got somebody who's willing to sit down and say, all right, let's talk about this. I've been there, man. I know what it's like.
Well, you say that. I don't mind calling out this failure. I got in a lot of trouble for doing that. At another department. I don't mind saying it. It's the most recent department I was hired at. It was at Pearl. My second shift there, I had a young, he was in his 20s, super nice guy though. Man, his wife left him. And so I got dispatched for an attempted suicide. And he was going to shoot himself. Thank God his brothers were able to physically tackle him and get the gun from him, restrain him. And he ran out and ran off in another part of the city. And so we were all out looking for him. And this is where, you know, you talk about God moments and all that. There's 7 of us searching for this guy. This is my second shift.
You're the one that found him.
I'm the one that, I don't find him. I bump into him.
What?
I'm walking down so I'm searching this apartment complex looking for him. He comes around a corner. I come around a corner. I'm talking about we bump into one another.
Mm-hmm.
And my initial reaction, I was like, oh man, I'm sorry. Wait, are you so-and-so? And he was like, yeah. I was like, hey, can we talk for a minute? So, you know, I go into my thing. Once he realized what was going on, completely shut down.
Yeah.
No emotion. I'm good. I'm good. You wouldn't understand. You wouldn't understand. You wouldn't understand. And I was like, okay. So I knelt down, got right in front of him, and I said, look at me. And I said, a year and a half ago, my wife left me. And that led to me going down a dark road that eventually led to me attempting suicide. Mm-hmm. And I hit my chest on my uniform. I said, but look at where I am now. Mm-hmm. I said, I got the help. I got healed. Look at me now. I said, so I do understand. And as soon as I said that, that dude's face, demeanor, everything washed away.
Yeah.
And he started talking to me. He opened up. And so we had a conversation for a few minutes. He opened up to me. I explained to him. I was like, look, I used to be fire, also fire and EMT. I said, can I explain to you what's going to happen tonight? So he allowed me to explain that. So by the time fire walked up, he shook my hand. He was like, man, thank you. and he very willingly went and got on the ambulance, and he went and got help.
Yeah.
As far as I know, and I pray to God he's good today. The chief and the assistant chief reprimanded me for that. Told
Wow.
me that I cannot be telling people that story, that it does not look good for the citizens of that community to know that I had that event in my life. And I was in shock. I was like, are you serious? And you know me, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Donald Trump. I'm going to stand up to you if you're wrong. And I looked at him and I said, you're going to love this. I said, what would you have liked me to do then? I said, if I had had cancer and this was a cancer patient, it would be okay to tell them I had cancer. If I had survived a car wreck or a gunshot, and that's what these people were dealing with, I could talk about that, right? And they said, well, yeah, that would be fine. I said, but because I survived a mental health part in my life and got help and am healed for it, I can't talk about that. Their response was, what you should have done is turn your body cam off. I said, hold on. Because my timeline, this was after Richland. So I was like, after what happened in Richland, I was like, y'all really just told me I should have turned my body cam off? Like, you would rather me, you're so uncomfortable with the topic of mental health that you would rather me break policy and turn my body cam off while I'm on a scene talking to a civilian than to have record that a year and a half ago, a part of my body broke and I went to the doctor and got help for it.
Right.
And that was that. I didn't get wrote up for it, but yeah, I got verbally reprimanded for it. And 3 days later, I was terminated from that department.
Well, and I'll just say, as someone who teaches classes in, dealing with the public for law enforcement, one of the things we talk about is being more human, more accessible, humanizing yourself and the people that you deal with.
Absolutely.
And to me, I would much rather, as a citizen who knows a whole hell of a lot about cops.
Yeah.
And at this point, I am the only reporter for 15 years that has gotten to specialize in nothing but law enforcement and first responders. So that qualifies me as an expert.
Yeah.
I would much rather have an officer that can get on my level and say, I've been there, I get it, when I'm at my worst moment, than one that comes in and is like, ma'am, please walk outside to the vehicle. And they put their hand on my head and they duck me down into the car. And then I'm on my way to I don't know where or whatever's going to happen. In that situation, and the thing that we don't face well enough, because we also have a society that likes to tell us that we'll just get over it. There's somebody else out there. Yeah. Heartbreak is crippling. Heartbreak, it is as much as having your legs broken or something else. Your back broken. Yeah. When you are heartbroken, you can't see straight. You can't think straight. All you know is get me out of this feeling that I'm having right now. Some people drink. What you find is people who want to commit suicide, most of them, they want out of their situation, not their life. They don't actually want to die. They want to escape the feelings they're having. To not be able to access that as a police officer, in a world that right now officers are vilified because you guys are supposed to be all these things that are hard and sharp and dark, and to be able to just be soft and vulnerable and say, dude, I don't want this to happen to you.
Yeah.
I want to tell you what saved me.
Yeah. Well, and what I worry about more than anything, and by the way, to the ones that I just talked about, I ought to send you a thank you card because it led to where I am today. Don't
it
get
got
me
you into
wrong.
leaps.
It led me to where I am today. Mm-hmm. And I promise you this, me helping one person not ever commit suicide or be willing to go to therapy or get out of addiction is worth anything more than ever putting on that uniform for a department again.
God's hand moves in ways that we don't expect. And sometimes people we expect to act differently act a certain way. And it's absolutely because God knows that he has to use this situation to put you somewhere that he wants you.
Yeah.
And I do believe that's what happened here.
Well, and I'll tell this now. I have chosen over the last year to remain quiet about everything, because what I was doing was sitting back and with your help and with some other people's help, really watching and seeing, all right, what God's doing. And what he was doing was teaching me a whole lot more about this problem. And igniting a passion and a fire in me to donate a ungodly amount of time into trying to make this difference. But while we're telling stories, I will tell and I will clear the air real quick on what happened at the agency I was at for 3 days, and what happened to this podcast for 6 months. Is I had a lot of pressure. I was searching for a department to go to after Richland, and I was getting some feedback from some administrations that they did not like my podcast.
Yeah.
They did not like me being so open to the public about my struggles and struggles of others, and talking about mental health, talking about suicide awareness, all that. And so when I received the opportunity to go to that agency, I was told a month before officially being hired that I had to delete my podcast, this one that we're on now. I had to delete the podcast. I had to delete all social media content around mental health awareness, suicide awareness. I could not speak openly and in public about my own mental health journey, suicide awareness, or anything like that. And so, because at the time I needed a job, I agreed to it. And I thought my calling was to be back in that uniform at the time. And so I looked at it and I said, okay, well, if this is what it takes to pursue my calling, then I will hang this up, I will be quiet, and I will go out here and do my job. And so I got hired. And whenever you're hired at any police agency or fire or military, one of the first things you're going to have to do is take a psych test. Most of them are 300 to 500 question psych tests. And so when I sat down to take that test, I had not put a single thought to it. I sat down and I start, blowing through the test, reading the questions and all that. Well, the suicide questions came up.
Yeah.
And I froze. And my first thought was, okay, this administration told me to delete my podcast, to delete my social media stuff, and to not talk about my struggles, that they didn't want everybody knowing about it. Well, I don't know who all's going to see these results.
Right.
So I lied on the psych test. I answered no to all the questions on suicide. I didn't lie about anything else on the test, but the suicide questions I did. And me being me, I let the chief know that I did that after it. And so a few days after I let him know, I was called in and I was put on administrative leave. I had to turn in my badge, my gun, and my car, and I had to go see the psychologist. And I was like, well, that's fine. I've talked to them a few times. So I go sit down with him and I explained everything, and the psychologist cleared me. He said, man, I completely understand why you did that. And he actually supported the same statistic that we have in LEAPS that we teach. 90% of officers have thought about suicide. 60% have a detailed plan of how they will do it if that day comes.
That's right.
And so he was like, man, no, you're fine. You're definitely fit for duty. He's like, as a matter of fact, because we talked a lot about things I was involved with, the podcast, different stuff, how that journey happened. And he's like, dude, I commend you for getting the help, healing, and now you're trying to help other people. So I thought it would all be over and I would get to go back to work. And so a few days drug on, and I got called in again, and I was told that it would be in my best interest to resign. And I was like, well, I don't really want to do that, and I don't agree with it. So I was given the opportunity to address the board of aldermen and the mayor in that city and tell my story and explain why I lied on that test. Now, I did not in that meeting tell them what the chief had asked me to do regarding deleting all the social media and not talking about my story.
Right.
And so the next morning I show up for a meeting and I was told that I had been terminated from that city. I no longer had a job. Well, then this is what's funny. It was cited, I was terminated for an integrity issue. And I was told that I was a liar and that I could not be trusted for the rest of my career because I lied about those questions. I straight up asked him, I said, so you don't want to take any responsibility for what you asked me to delete that therefore led to me feeling like I needed to hide that? And that was a heated conversation, and I was terminated. Now, the interesting part was I worked 3 shifts. I got a paycheck. I arrested people during those 3 shifts. But
and you saved a life.
yeah. But later, the next week, I still have not received any paperwork. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I don't know what the report to minimum standard board is going to be and stuff like that. And so I call and ask about it, like, hey, am I resigning? Am I fired? Like, nobody's told me anything. I haven't received anything. If I try and find another job, what do I tell people? Well, obviously, in my opinion, this is an admittance of guilt and shame on their part. They said, we're just going to act like you weren't hired. And the media, what they put out, the media statement was, officer did not finish the hiring process. No, I finished the hiring process. I even worked 3 shifts. I was in a vehicle by myself working, made arrest, and got a paycheck. But then they turned around, they lied to the media.
Right.
And they say that I didn't hire the hiring process.
Right.
The funny part of that to me, and the sad part, and the lack of I guess you could say leadership and just kind of ignorance is, obviously they might not have taken your POI class because
They had actually.
Oh, well, that makes it worse because I was terminated for an integrity issue for lying on the psych evaluation. But they turned around and told the citizens of that community and the media a blatant lie that I had not finished the hiring process. Therefore, I didn't ever work. Well, I did work. And so at that point, I realized too, I remember I called you, I called Anthony Fox, I called a couple other people right after it. And man, I remember when I walked out of that and I went and got my truck, it was kind of funny. I knew as much as it hurt and I was sad and I was disappointed, like I knew how much God was in control because when I sat down in my truck, I remember I cut my truck on and I just sat back for a minute and I was like, I remember I looked up, at my ceiling like I'm looking at God and I was like, bro, I don't know what you're doing,
but I trust you.
But whatever it is must be good because this is just getting wild at this point.
Yeah.
And I did. I ain't gonna lie. One of the things I very much learned in therapy, and I know you have too, is, dude, you gotta feel it and you gotta sit through it and you gotta let it pass.
Yeah.
So I did. I sat there for about 10 minutes in the parking lot of that PD, and man, I cried like a big old baby.
Yeah.
And I let it all out. And then I left and I called some of y'all and I was like, this is what happened, da, da, da. And everybody had the same reply. How do you feel? And I was like, I'm good. I was like, I just cried. I let it pass through me. And I looked at God and said, I don't know what you're doing, but it must be good. Right. And, from there, a lot of great things have happened. And now we're involved in Leaps. We're starting Maps. I immediately started this back up. And that's why, for those of you out there that might be listening that have messaged me and asked what happened to Save One for months and why it wasn't active and why it all got deleted. And I told you then that it would eventually come out. Well, this is it. That is why. And so everything has a purpose.
It does. And I think the thing is, I know Anthony Fox said it to you and I did too after the fact. Because I think when you called me to tell me you were going to that agency, I said, that's where you don't want to go. Or
Yeah.
actually, but long before you actually were going there, I said, if mental health is your thing, that's the last place you want to go. And understand, I love those guys, and I don't want there to be any question. Those guys are my friends too.
Yeah.
But I just knew that wasn't the place to be the spokesperson for mental health,
Yeah.
And so when it all went down, I remember I said it and Anthony Fox said it, like, well, you stepped away from your calling. This is where you're supposed to be. And whether you're supposed to be a police
Yeah.
officer or not, I don't know. That may come back into play one day.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you're a police chief and you're listening to this or you're watching this, like, think about what you want to do with your department, because there are guys, whether it's Jeremy or someone else like him, that have done this work and can make such a difference. But you were put there to work with Law Enforcement Alliance for peer support because you've been to the places that these guys are dealing with. You're there where this MAPS that we keep talking about, Mayday Alliance for Peer Support. Is that what it is?
Yep.
We just named it. That's why I can't remember it. But it's for first responders, for firefighters and EMS. And that you have a passion for that. You're good at it. You get it. Everyone that meets you says you get it.
Yep.
So I feel like I have to say all that to stress that, and I'm not calling anyone evil here, but there's a Bible verse that says what you intended for evil, God intended for good.
Yeah.
And so whether it's the forces that, the powers that be that led to that situation, I think it's a victory in the end. But it is also very much, my first thought afterwards was, if I was at that agency and I was a police officer, I would never admit my feelings about anything again.
I got quite a few of those phone calls.
Yeah.
Telling me that they were ashamed of what happened, and that right there is the reason they would never walk down the hallway and let that administration know anything was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And quite a few guys there have talked to me about stuff, and it's kind of funny. They ain't talking to y'all.
Yeah.
They calling me to talk about their stuff.
And it's a good thing
because
that you're
they
there.
trust me.
And that's the other thing too. I do have to add that if this hadn't happened to you, they might not know you were the guy they could talk to.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and the biggest lesson I learned, and Fox's thing, he'll say, God will thump you.
Yeah.
Well, that day, I think, if I'm not wrong, when I talked to him, he said, little bro, God ain't thumping you. He punching you in the face.
Yep.
I done told you to quit running from your calling.
Mm-hmm.
You going to listen? Because I love Fox.
Yeah.
He going to call it like it is.
He does.
And so he was real quick. He said, take it on the chin. He said, that's God hitting you, telling you you're running from your calling. He said, now go do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he was the first guest when I brought the podcast back. But I know we've been going for a while. I see Daniel over here itching.
Yeah.
We
We kept him here for quite some
real
time. I can
cool-
come back sometime if you want. We can
I
finish
think
this
what
later.
we're gonna do, I'm gonna say this real quick. So there are two organizations that Therese and I are heavily involved with. One of those is LEAPS.
Mm-hmm.
LEAPS is Law Enforcement Alliance for Peer Support. If you are in the law enforcement community and you are not in LEAPS, please get in LEAPS.
And you can contact one of us to get information
Absolutely. LEAPS began back in the 90s by Tim Rutledge. Tim Rutledge is, I hold him at such a high place in my life with respect. He has taken it from starting it right here in central Mississippi to he teaches it all over the country. So for once, Mississippi is leading in something.
That's right.
And so what we are embarking on now, actively, and it's kind of why we keep laughing when we say the name, because we literally just named it within the past few days. The fireside does not have a peer support mechanism at the moment. And so myself, Therese, a group of other in the fire service and EMS service around here, multiple agencies across the state of Mississippi, we are actively creating an entity now that we look like we're going to call MAPS, Mayday Alliance for Peer Support. We are mirroring the LEAPS model, but it's going to be for the fire department.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're working on that. There's going to be a lot of information coming out about that. We want to tell you a lot more about it in detail, which I have just decided in this moment we're going to do on a different episode in a couple weeks.
Let's do that. Yeah. We can't cram it in today.
Yeah, no, because it's a big topic. We got a lot of really good stuff coming. I will say this. If you are in law enforcement, if you are in fire service, if your heart, if your passion aligns with what ours is right now, send me a message, because we want you in LEAPS. If you're on the fire side, we want you in MAPS. And especially if you have that passion or if you have a background that would help us. We want to get you involved on the front end of maps as we help grow this and we spread word and we develop all the components of it. And we're about to start doing fundraising. And then in the fall, we're going to start having some of our first classes that Tim Rutledge and myself will be the instructors on. And I look forward to in a few years when we're teaching maps all across the country as well.
Yep, absolutely.
So I love you.
I love you too. Thank you for
Thank
letting
you
me
for
be here.
being here.
Mhm.
You've experienced a lot, but I will tell you, I don't know many people who love the men and the women in law enforcement and fire more than you do, and I appreciate that so much.
Thank you for seeing me.
Absolutely. All right, thank y'all. We'll talk to y'all soon.